this may be my last movie review ever, and I say that tongue-in-cheek because one, my schedule has changed drastically. I don't necessarily have as much time as I used to do these things, but two, because I really do love movies, and I realize that maybe I just don't have the sensibilities to be able to enjoy a good superhero / blockbuster film anymore. So let's talk about it. Spider-Man No Way Home. First of all, these last three Spider-Man movies, I don't understand what the point was of giving them such boring subtitles. Homecoming, Far From Home, and No Way Home. Did someone miss their home or something like that? Did someone need a hug? I really don't get it. But putting that aside, I really wanted to really love this movie. I went into it with some reservation because, first thing, I'm no longer that impressed with Tom Holland's Spider-Man or his Peter Parker. More so his Peter Parker. Because when we saw him in Civil War back in, what was that, 2012? Whenever that was. He was a head buster. He was still a high school kid, and he acted like a high school kid. But subsequent to that, I was expecting to see some type of maturity in him, and he still plays Peter Parker as though he's a dork. And now I realize I'm a little older, and my Peter Parker is the Peter Parker of John Romita, the 70s and 80s. And the Steve Ditko Peter Parker back in the 60s. I understand that things have to be updated, but my Peter Parker is also the Peter Parker of the Daily Bugle, who has a little fling with Betty Brant, who is poorly represented in this film as well. My Peter Parker is the one who dates a Mary Jane who is white and has red hair and uses the term tiger. I said it. Send your hate mail to me. And also, my Peter Parker is the one who dates Gwen Stacy. Now, I don't believe Gwen Stacy has ever been introduced into the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. But be that as it may. And let me go back to that controversial statement I just made about Mary Jane. Okay, I don't want to fight the whole race swapping thing anymore. If you know me, you know my position about that. I'm not a fan of it. It has nothing to do with being ashamed of who I am. But even if you're going to race swap, my God, can you give us a better written MJ instead of this skater chick who just the whole millennial young thing happening with her, so uninteresting as a character. Anyway, moving forward, this could have been a great film. As it is, it's just a film that's not bad, something to pass the time. What made it not a great film? Well, for me, I just couldn't see past the gimmick. This film to me was marketed based solely on the fact that it had a gimmick, or the potential of a gimmick, the potential to have stars from previous Spider-Man franchises appearing in this film. I'm not going to give anything away, even though you probably already know by now, but the things that they do in this film, I just can't get past the gimmick. We do see, and this is in the trailer, so there's no spoiler here, we see Doc Ock, we see Electro, we see Green Goblin, and we see Sandman. So it's kind of like Sinister 6 minus 2, I guess. They have multiple villains in other superhero films, so I'm like, that seems a little gimmicky to me. But then there was always the question of, is Andrew Garfield going to appear? Is Tobey Maguire going to appear? So again, just going into it, I just felt like the only thing this movie has really banking on it is the potential of the gimmick. And I'm not going to reveal anything, but the gimmick is in full force. The movie's a bit schizophrenic in that the first hour is all about the bad MCU jokiness. Everything is a joke. I mean, I like fun in a movie too. I mean, even Winter Soldier and Civil War gave me some jokes. Great, you need that to break up the tension. But the first half of this film is all about jokes. And it's kind of played like a joke the way the premise is kicked off with a spell that's cast errantly by Doctor Strange. The way that happens is very jokey. Oh, and let me say this also. The whole thing about at the end of Far From Home, where Peter Parker's identity is revealed, that doesn't play a big part in this film. You would think the way they built it up at the end of the last film that it would have a lot more consequences at the beginning of this film. I mean, what they do is cool, but you would have thought there'd be more to it. You thought that you would think that there'd be maybe a loved one who was put in jeopardy because of because Spider-Man's identity has been revealed. I will give this away. The biggest thing that happens because of Peter Parker's identity being revealed is that his friends don't get into MIT. That's one of the reasons this film was a letdown for me, because there are a lot of moments in this film where they could have really played up some pathos, some drama, and they skipped right by it. But let me get back to the first half was all jokes. The second half, it becomes a totally different movie. And I was told by all my friends, oh yeah, that second half you might be crying, you'll be shocked. They do some things that really make the stakes high. And I'm gonna try not to spoil this, but there are some scenes where I'm supposed to feel a certain way, but because they're just retreads of other scenes in other films pretty much, or other setups or scenarios, I felt nothing. I felt absolutely nothing. There's one scene where Tom Holland is grieving, or he's upset about something, and Tom Holland is a very effective actor as far as I can see, but I just didn't feel any remorse or consequence over what was happening, because the first half of the film was so full of jokes. It just felt like they needed a big thing to happen, so this was it. And I'm like, okay, that's the big thing. I don't feel anything about it, so let's move on. But they stay on it, they stay on it, they stay on it, because they want you to know that this is the moment. This is what you wanted from the first film. This is what you wanted even from the Garfield Spider-Man film. I just didn't feel it. The second half also, it suffers from, I hate to use the word suffer because, I mean, this has worked well in other films, but there's a big CGI fight fest. And I just was not moved. The action was cool. I just wasn't moved. I guess I'm getting jaded by these CGI films, these CGI stunt pieces. To me, you know, the scene in Captain America Winter Soldier where they're fighting Bucky in the street, Black Widow and Cap, all practical stuff. You know, for the most part, the actors are there. You're seeing them go toe to toe. That's what really moves me. As a matter of fact, in this film, there is a scene where Peter Parker as Spider-Man goes toe to toe with a villain. No CGI. That was probably the only scene in this film that moved me, because it felt real, because the villain has done something to Parker that makes me cheer for him. There's one scene in this movie that really stands out as a moment that could have had a huge emotional punch. And I'm not going to spoil what it is. There's a hint to it in the trailers, but I'm not going to. Yeah, well, it's where we see MJ falling off of some building, and you see Tom Holland's Spider-Man reaching out to grab her. And of course, it makes us think of Gwen Stacy's death, both in the comic books and from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man 2, I believe, Amazing Spider-Man 2. So, with that scene, there is a huge potential for a great dramatic moment, okay? And it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. I'm not going to say whether or not MJ survives or not. But let's just say that there could have been a moment for great drama, and they just went right by it. And I was very kind of disappointed in that. It's not a terrible movie. I want to emphasize that. If you are into these Spider-Man movies, you will love this film. This film's got tons of villains, and it's got tons of surprises as well. Like I said, I don't like Tom Holland's portrayal. I'm ready to see him as a mature Peter Parker. And there are hints to that at the conclusion of this film. It's kind of like the James Bond film, where at the end of that movie, it's unclear where they're going to go, but you can see there's a vast open territory where they can take the franchise. That happens. That's the same case with this movie as well. So if there is a second trilogy, and there are hints that there will be, that Tom Holland is prepared to sign on to another 3 movies, that will be interesting to see. Okay, so I'm going to give this movie, I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. There you have it. That's my review of Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm sure people will think I am nuts, and they will say that I am a Grinch and that I don't like anything. I would have you go back into my archive and see that there are a lot of films that I liked this year alone. Okay, so all right, check out my next few reviews. I'm going to try to get some late reviews out before the end of the year. I already recorded my No Time to Die review and my Shang-Chi review. Just haven't had time to edit them, so I'll do that. Hopefully before the end of the year, get them in before the end of 2021. All right, everyone, have a happy holiday and enjoy the movies. That's the martini.